If you're wondering, will my donations to deaf missions really make a difference in people's lives? Oh, then you need to watch the rest of this video. I sat down and interviewed one of our ASLV translation team members. Now, are you ready? You'll get to watch this wonderful interview. It's long, but it's so inspiring and insightful. I talked with Renca Dunn. This is her name sign. She has an amazing story, and I asked her to share it with us today. Renca has a passion to help us here at Deaf Missions to create numerous videos for deaf people. Her life was radically changed by Jesus. If you've ever been curious and wanted to peek behind the curtain on the life of a deaf person, this video is perfect for you. Renca shares her real experiences and struggles and explains exactly why deaf people need communication in sign language to help them see Jesus. My first question for you is, how is communication a challenge for you when sign language is not used? How does that make you feel?
I think this is an excellent question to ask deaf people in general. This is a layered kind of question for me because I was born deaf and I grew up as a deaf person. I come from a third generation of having a deaf family. Even with that background, I still have thousands of experiences related with communication barriers and how they affect the way I feel. The first thing that we need to recognize is that sign language is the best way that deaf people use to communicate and express ourselves. It's been historically and scientifically proven. Now, for me, when sign language is taken away or not used, part of me just withers away because this means I do not have access to communication. This means I'm denied intentionally of getting information or denied of a better understanding of something. If I already struggle with that here in the USA, imagine how many other deaf people in different countries also struggle with this. Our number one factor in relationships with people in our lives in general is communication. When the communication is gone, the relationship is also gone.
Wow. When you first saw the gospel and American Sign Language, how did it change your life?
The Bible finally came alive for me. The clapping trees, the singing birds, the dancing meadows, the patient Moses. Wow. The persistent Esther, the revengeful Saul, the weeping Magdalene. Most of all, our loving Jesus. Words cannot do justice to explain to deaf people about the Bible in depth. This is where sign language comes in. No, there will never be perfection in any language translation, but there will always be connection, and sign language provides that opportunity for deaf people. Reading the English text of "He leads me beside still waters" has never been as visual to me until I saw how that verse was signed. I finally can have a clear picture in my head of what the English text means. Deaf people in general depend a lot on visuals. We need to see things in order for us to see it in our heads. So when I see the Bible in sign language, I finally feel that God does get me. He understands me. He wants me to understand him. He loves me. He wants me to love him. He speaks in my language. That's awesome. That's the best way. God signs my sign language.
That's great. Yeah. Tell us your testimony and about how seeing the gospel in ASL is affecting other deaf people and changing their lives.
For thousands of years, deaf people have been deprived of our language. We've been made to feel ashamed. We've been oppressed. We've been rejected. We've been made fun of. We've been looked down upon. We've been viewed as people that others need to fix. Deaf people are used to this view from the majority of the world. There's a huge gap between God and many deaf people out there. No, it is not because we are deaf, but it's because the communication of our primary language for the Bible is scarce.
Yeah.
I've traveled to many different countries, and I realize how many deaf people out there suffer greatly because in their countries, they are not accepted in their society. Most deaf people I meet mention they feel distant from God or even question if God exists because they do not understand. Deaf people sit in churches watching hearing people preach with their speaking lips. They try to read the texts inside the Bible in a language that they already struggle with in schools. They hold their Bible in their hands, given to them by hearing people, and yes, the Bible is written in text, but the problem is that they never learned how to read or write. So the Bible they have builds up dust over time. This is why sign language for the gospel is so important. It's all about accessibility.
Yeah.
I recall one deaf woman I met. It was during one of the community checks that we have related with our translation work. This deaf woman came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder. I looked at her, and she held onto my arm. And she was crying. And through her tears, she said, "I finally understand. Thank you." Wow, that touched my heart. Her words were enough for me to see how important it is to see more of the gospel in sign language. Seeing other people understand the gospel in ASL is the difference that it makes for me in my life. This access to understanding the Bible in sign language is not just for me, but for every deaf person on this planet. The gospel is meant for everyone to know and to understand. If that one deaf woman made a difference for me related with the gospel in ASL, then how much more of a difference can we make together with sign language for deaf people around the world? Together, we can.
Wow. Imagine what could happen if more people around the world could receive the gospel through sign language. It would impact deaf people everywhere and make a huge difference. What will you do now that you know what is needed? Your gifts help us clearly communicate the gospel with deaf people. Renca, me, and deaf people all over the world are waiting for your partnership and support. Join us.